Without warning, Japan invaded Manchuria. Once again, men who were peaceful became the slaves of men who were violent. In Washington, D.C., our Secretary of State made a most vigorous protest. The American government does not intend to recognize any situation, treaty, or agreement which may be brought about by means of aggression. But we, the people, hadn't much time to think about Manchuria. We were wrestling with the worst depression in our history. Some of us were out of jobs. Some of us stood in bread lines. Some of us suffered homemade aggression. Some of us were choked with dust. Some of us had no place to go. 2 years later, in 1933, while most of you were graduating from high school, we read that a funny little man called Hitler had come into power in Germany. We heard that a thing called the Nazi Party had taken over. Today we rule Germany, tomorrow the world. What kind of talk was that? It must be only hot air. In 1935, about the time you had your first date, we read that strutting Mussolini had attacked far-off Ethiopia. The disease seemed to be spreading, so Congress assembled to insulate us against the growing friction of war.
We want no war. We'll have no war, save in defense of our own people or our own honor.
Toward this end, our chosen representatives passed the Neutrality Act. No nation at war could buy manufactured arms or munitions from the United States. In 1936, when you were running around in jalopies, we were disturbed by news from Spain. In our newsreels, we saw German and Italian air forces and armies fighting in Spain and wondered what they were doing there. For the first time, we saw great cities squashed flat, civilians bombed and killed. In November 1936, the American Institute of Public Opinion, known as the Gallup poll, asked a representative cross-section of American people, if another war develops in Europe, should America take part again? No. 95%. We the people had spoken. 19 out of 20 of us said, include us out. To further insulate ourselves, we added a cash and carry amendment to the Neutrality Act. Not only wouldn't we sell munitions, but we wouldn't sell anything at all, not even a spool of thread, unless warring powers sent their own ships and paid cash on the line. In 1937, the press services received a flash from Asia. The Japs were turning Asia into a slaughterhouse. But for us, Asia was still far away. In September 1937, the Gallup poll asked us In the present fight between Japan and China, are your sympathies with either side? We answered, with China, 43%, with Japan, 2%. Undecided, 55%. We hadn't made up our minds about China. Our Neutrality Act barred sales of armaments only to nations at war. The Japanese had not declared war, so we went right on selling scrap iron and aviation gasoline to Japan. In March 1938, Hitler had not declared war either, but his goose-stepping army suddenly smashed in and occupied all the soil of Austria. 6 months later, Hitler and his stooge met the anxious democracies at Munich. Hitler promised peace in our time if Britain and France would give him that part of Czechoslovakia known as the Sudetenland. Britain and France gave him that part of Czechoslovakia, hoping to avert war. Now we had his word, peace in our time. At home, we began to hear strange headlines.
Extras, FBI captured termination. Read all about it. Nazi spy getting captured.
We sat in our theaters unbelieving as motion pictures exposed Nazi espionage in America.
As Germans, we know that if America is to be free, we must destroy the chain that ties the whole misery of American politics together. And that chain is the United States Constitution.
Could these things really be? Yes, these subversive acts were happening in real life every day. German-American fronts organized for the purpose of destroying us marched under our very noses.
I pledge undivided allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In our press, we read the news from abroad that Nazis were spending millions, arming Germany to the teeth. We read that the Tokyo Diet was appropriating tremendous sums, converting Japan into one vast munitions plant. We watched these supposedly poor, have-not nations spend huge sums for armament, and we wondered why. Arrogantly, they told us why. They had declared war on us long before the shooting started.
We have actually been at war since the day when we lifted the flag of our revolution against the democratic world. The Germans are a noble and unique race, to whom the earth was given by the grace of God. The world must come to look up to our emperor as the great ruler of all nations.
When the people of these three nations elected to follow their leaders, Death Incorporated, they organized to smash personal freedom, equality of man, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, organized to smash the very principles which made us the people we are. So in December 1938, when the Gallup poll asked us, should the United States increase the strength of its Army, Navy, and Air Force, we answered yes, 85%. It was time to look to our defense.
Gentlemen, this is the Military Affairs Committee of the United States House of Representatives meeting for the purpose of considering national defense.
The Navy is asking for an increase of 25% in authorized naval tonnage.
in view of the grave international situation.
Congress, reflecting the voice of the people, appropriated the largest sum for military use ever voted during peace in American history. We didn't dream that a few years later it would look like peanuts. On March 14, 1939, Adolf Hitler broke the pledge he made at Munich. He took over all the rest of Czechoslovakia. There would be no more peace in our time. April 7, 1939, as we here in America observe Good Friday,
Italy attacks Albania.
the picture was becoming clear. The conquering forces of violence were being set loose in the world. Where would they stop? In a last desperate effort to avert a world war, President Roosevelt, as a neutral, sent messages to Hitler and Mussolini, asking their promise to respect the independence of 30 free countries.
Und vor allem diese Anfrage an Roosevelts.
To Adolf Hitler, this message was a huge joke as he repeated the names to a jeering Reichstag.
Schweden, Dänemark, Niederlande, Belgien, Großbritannien, Irland, Frankreich, Portugal, Spanien, die Schweiz, Liechtenstein, Luxemburg, Polen, Ungarn, Rumänien, Jugoslawien, Russland, Bulgarien, Türkei, Irak, Arabien, Syrien, Palästina, Ägypten.
This was the only answer the president received. On September the 1st, 1939, the Nazi army smashed into Poland. England and France had a treaty with Poland. Would they act now?
Adolf Hitler's all-out attack on Poland makes the long-dreaded European war a certainty. Prime Minister Chamberlain of Great Britain gave the Nazi dictator a 0 hour for withdrawing his troops from Poland. That 0 hour ends now. At this time, we transfer you to London for an important announcement by the British Prime Minister.
Up to the very last, it would have been quite possible to have arranged a peaceful and honorable settlement between Germany and Poland. But Hitler would not have it. The situation in which no word given by Germany's ruler could be trusted, and no people or country could feel itself safe, had become intolerable. Now may God bless you all, and may he defend the right, for it is evil things that we shall be fighting against. And against them I am certain that the right will prevail.
6 hours after Great Britain declared war on Nazi Germany, the Republic of France followed. All France is in a maelstrom of activity. The Maginot Line has already opened fire on the Germans. The sparring is ended. World War II has begun.
At home, we were asked, what country do you consider responsible for causing this war? Germany, 82%. We Americans had no doubt who started it. Also, we began to fear that this war was going to concern us. President Roosevelt called a special session of Congress to reconsider the embargo against selling munitions.
I have asked the Congress to reassemble in extraordinary session in order that it may consider and act on changes in our neutrality law.
The men of Congress wrestled with their beliefs and our futures. They debated and they argued.
The arms embargo is far too great a security. Embargo Act, as it now stands, is one-sided and works entirely to the advantage of one side. Therefore, the Embargo Act should be modified.
We, the people, also debated and argued whether we should sell arms and munitions. When the question was put to us, we had an answer. Should we change the Neutrality Act so we can sell war supplies? Yes, 57%. Shortly after, our representatives changed the Neutrality Act. We lifted the embargo on arms and munitions. Now we would sell if purchasers would pay and take the stuff away in their own ships. Meanwhile, on the other side of the globe, Japan was busy trying to bomb, shoot, and terrorize the Chinese into submission. We began to realize that if Japan conquered 400 million Chinese, she might become so strong as to run us right out of the Pacific. You will remember that 2 years earlier, in September 1937, when we were asked, in the present fight between Japan and China, are your sympathies with either side? Only 43% were with China. Most of us were undecided. In June 1939, when we were asked the same question, 74% said we were with China. Now our minds were made up. When we loaded our scrap iron on Japanese ships, our citizens protested. Let Mr. Atchison, Assistant Secretary of State, tell us the inside of the story.
So until the middle of 1940, the restriction of exports to Japan took the form of moral embargoes of aeroplanes and direct munitions. Then Congress passed the Export Control Act, and increasing cutoffs of scrap iron, aviation gasoline, and other strategic items followed. Exports were curtailed to the limit which those responsible for our defense were willing to risk. It was a fearful responsibility. On one side was the possibility, in fact the probability, that one day these materials might be used against us. On the other side was the possibility, in fact the probability, that to cut them off would provoke an attack which we were not then prepared to resist. Finally, in the summer of 1941, as it became clear that Japan was turning her back upon every possibility of reconciliation and adjustment, and was determined upon her great gamble of conquest, all exports ceased.
The leaders of Nazi Germany shifted their war machine into high gear. They overran into Denmark. They smashed into Norway. On May the 10th, 1940, they blitzed into Holland and Belgium.
The Nazis are marching ahead at the fastest speed a conquering army has moved in all history. All roads in France are choked with slow-moving masses of refugees. Nazis with dive bombers are strafing and bombing thousands of helpless women and children.
Mr. Geltenborg.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight, it seems clearly apparent that the first great phase of the war in the West has been won by Germany. The army of French and British has made a valiant battle in its effort to retreat to Dunkirk, where there is some slight chance that some part of it can be evacuated.
Adolf Hitler's mechanized forces are racing toward Paris as French resistance collapses.
On this 10th day of June, 1940, the hand that held the dagger has struck it into the back of its neighbor.
This is William L. Shirer speaking from the forest of Compiègne, where Adolf Hitler today is handing his armistice terms to France. It is 3:15 p.m. Adolf Hitler strides slowly toward the little clearing. I can see his face. It is grave, solemn, yet brimming with revenge. Off to one side is a large statue of Marshal Foch. Hitler does not appear to see it. Now we see the French walking down the avenue, led by General Hunsinger. Hitler and the other German leaders rise as the French enter. General Keitel reads the preamble to the German armistice terms. This whole ceremony is over in a quarter of an hour.
The last time I saw Paris, her heart was warm and gay. I heard the laughter of her heart in every street cafe. The last time I saw Paris, a tree would rest for spring, and lovers walked beneath those trees, and birds found songs to sing. I dodged the same old taxi cab that I had dodged for years. The chorus of their squeaky heart was music